Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast. Now, nearly 3 years ago on this podcast, I think it was on episode 217, I spoke to the guys at Virtual Instruments. And back then, they were helping to solve some of the most critical IT performance and availability issues in more than 500 of the world's largest data centers. In fact, their client lists at the time included the who's who of tech, with big names such as IBM, Microsoft, Salesforce, VMware, HP, all that were depending on Virtual Instruments. But I always follow the fortunes of past guests, and just like this show rebranded from the Tech Blog Writer podcast to Tech Talks Daily, since we last spoke, Virtual Instruments recently became Virtana. And of course, they're still enabling customers to harness real-time infrastructure analytics and transforming IT operations. But the company also introduced something called Cloud Wisdom to offer their customers a SaaS-based hybrid IT infrastructure management across multi-cloud environments. Upon reading those press releases, it sounds like a catch-up is in order. So please, pack your bags and join me in San Francisco as we prepare to speak to John Gentry, Chief Technology Officer and SVP of Business Development at Virtana. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Absolutely, Neil, and thank you for having me. So my name is John Gentry. I am the Chief Technology Officer for Virtual Instruments, now Virtana, and been with the company about 10 years. I have to say I am more excited than I've ever been to be in the position that we are in. You know, my responsibility here is really to engage the market, our customers, around major trends, the customer journey that they are on, and ensuring that they understand how we're building out our solutions to meet their needs, and make sure I give their feedback and what they need from us to our engineering organization, so that we're building products that are relevant and are helping them on that sort of march to a hybrid world.
And I'm glad you mentioned the rebrand there, because I think I last spoke to the team at Virtual Instruments, I think it was about 3 years ago, when this podcast was called the Tech Blog Writer podcast. That's since evolved into Tech Talks Daily. And you guys have rebranded from Virtual Instruments to Virtana. So it sounds like a catch-up is long overdue. So what's the story behind your rebrand?
No, I appreciate the question. I've actually been answering that one quite a bit of late, as I'm sure you can imagine. You know, one of my responsibilities is engaging with our ecosystem and all of our alliance partners, and they've all asked, why the rebrand, although they've all kind of been supportive of it as well. So, 3 years ago, we had just merged with Dynamix, bringing us, workload profiling, analytics, and simulation test capabilities to kind of close the loop on testing and monitoring. We then acquired Xangati to give us visibility into kind of the IP world and some understanding of applications. And then most recently, we acquired Metricly, which gives us a SaaS-based cloud-native monitoring solution. And so while Virtual Instruments was a very relevant name when we were instrumenting virtualized environments, the reality is our offering is much broader than that today. I think the customer world is much more dynamic with the introduction of cloud and containers. And, a lot of my customers are building containers as service infrastructures to support a multi-cloud environment and cloud-native applications. And so we really needed to refresh the brand and point to the future, which is all around applying, analytics and AI and machine learning to all the big data that we've collected throughout our history. So the Virtana brand is, paying tribute to our heritage. Most customers and partners know us as VI, which was short for Virtual Instruments. So the Virtana, the VI that starts Virtana, is that legacy VI. But really the focus is on real-time analytics and automation, which is where you get the RT, A&A. So the Virtana name has a heritage, It is VI, real-time analytics and automation. And it is, where we are headed. And I think in many ways where the industry is headed, with the sort of rise of AIOps and the need for leveraging machine intelligence to really make sense of all of the data that's coming in from, all the various monitoring of the infrastructure supporting mission critical applications.
And I also think it's worth highlighting that you were named one of the 8 global leaders inducted into the Information Age Data 50. Can you tell me more about that? Because that sounds like a fantastic achievement too.
Well, it was certainly an honor. And to be on any list with Mr. Moshe is always recognition that's unexpected. The thing that I find most interesting about that is one of the few inducted into that's not actually building data technologies from a storage perspective, but actually representing a company that's managing that data or making, helping customers make the best use of that data. And so it was an absolute honor. But I think, more importantly, it just speaks to the importance of really understanding workloads and understanding where workloads should live. I think that was the main impetus behind that was, the whole move to this kind of purposeful placement of workloads across all of the options available now that it's, a traditional 3-tiered infrastructure versus a converged versus a hyper-converged versus a cloud. I think a lot of customers are really struggling with where's the right place for a given application workload.
And for people just tuning in and hearing about Virtana for the first time, could you just tell me a little bit more about the kind of problems that you solve for your customers and what makes you guys unique and stand out from the crowd compared to the other solutions in that marketplace?
Virtana, at the core, we've been monitoring the infrastructure from compute or virtualized compute across, compute network storage for quite some time, over 10 years, as long as I've been with the company. And to do that effectively, we had to build a platform that is capable of massive data ingest and correlation. But what we found was just generating a ton of data doesn't necessarily help the end user or the customer understand what that data means. And so we got into the analytics business, started developing an AI engine back in 2012. I know that AIOps is all the rage today, but we've been at this for 7+ years. And really, I think what our goal is to have our customers able to capture and visualize their infrastructure in the context of the application. So not just, is my array behaving well or performing well, or is my compute well utilized and servicing, but more importantly, what application is it servicing? Is it a tier 0 application or a tier 3 application? And really just that ability to put the infrastructure in the context of the application and then apply, advanced AI to understand what are the trends, what is normal behavior, what is a deviation from normal, how to identify potential congestion or contention for resource that's going to cause an application impact. And how do I, as a result, deliver SLAs? And I think the real differentiator from us is the ability to do that in a heterogeneous environment and kind of decouple or separate how a company manages the service levels associated with application infrastructure, deliver on capacity planning and problem identification and remediation, and separate that from the underlying infrastructure. So it doesn't matter if you're running vendor A storage or vendor B compute, or you're moving to cloud, or you have a hybrid reality, being able to have the same visualization, the same dashboarding, the same reporting, the same alerting across all of those environments. So you're kind of liberated from being tied into a given technology solution and able to make the best choice to support your business from a cost performance perspective.
And at Virtana, you are responsible for keeping up with and understanding key IT industry trends that affect product strategy and strategic alliances. So I've got to ask, what are the biggest trends that you're seeing right now, especially as we're preparing for life in not only a new year in 2020, but also a new decade as well?
Yeah, no, that's definitely not only what I'm responsible for, but probably the most exciting part of my job is sort of staying in touch with where the industry is going and where our customers are going. I'd say there's a couple of trends that I've identified. I'll give you an early scoop because I think these are in some of the predictions that I've made for the broader kind of 2020 outlook. But from an infrastructure perspective, I've talked and I said back in 2019, that 2019 would be the year that cloud became rationalized and we moved from cloud first to cloud smart. I think we've kind of seen that the world is going to be hybrid. But what I'm noticing going into 2020 that's very interesting is cost and accountability around cloud is becoming to the forefront. And companies are starting to shift their infrastructure strategy. We've had infrastructure as a service. We sort of saw that evolve into platform as a service as teams brought services that would typically be in the application layer into the infrastructure, things like database as a service or other things. And what I'm watching now is, companies starting to build out container as a service, and the ability to support a cloud native application, but the ability to support that on-prem as well, so they can make the decision of what's the most cost effective and what's the most performance appropriate place to run this workload. And so I'm seeing a big trend toward container as a service on-prem to support a true multi-cloud environment. And I'd say that's something we're going to see a lot of in 2020. I think the other thing that, really has been, front and center for my focus as I'm responsible for our, alliances and business development, is you're seeing a lot more collaboration across the ecosystem. I think customers are tired of getting point solutions from individual vendors and trying to cobble them together themselves. I think they're looking for the industry to bring them integrated solutions. And certainly the maturation of REST API-based data exchange between platforms is a part of that. We joined and we're an inaugural member of Dynamix Integration Partner Program earlier this year. And that has paid huge dividends for both companies as we bring application performance and infrastructure performance together for our customers with data sharing and alert sharing between the two. So I think 2020, you're really going to see that expand even more. We're in early discussions with how do we have a third provider in that ecosystem integration between all three companies. So, from an infrastructure perspective, I think container as a service and sort of the ability to support true multi-cloud as companies refactor, and the rise of the ecosystem and ecosystem integrations delivering value to customers as opposed to them having to cobble it together or use what I used to call the alt tab integration of multiple panes of glass. I think that those are two things we're going to see really come to the forefront in the next year. So you mentioned that the new decade. I said 2020. Obviously, everyone wants to have 2020 vision. 2020 is the year we get 2020 vision around things like cloud, multi-cloud, and integrations. It could be a very interesting time going into the next decade.
It really feels that way. And artificial intelligence, machine learning have already started to dominate conversations around that digital transformation of IT operations. But many organizations, it feels, are still understandably still determining how to apply these concepts in practice and in real world scenarios. So where are we in deploying these kinds of smart technologies in IT from everything that you're seeing out there?
Well, that's a raging debate, Neil, as I'm sure you're well aware. I think AIOps has caught the mainstream attention. It's kind of all the rage in 2019. There's a couple of, I would say, cautious optimism is kind of, I think, where we are. To your point, I think they're just starting to understand how to apply it. I'm seeing companies look at it a couple of ways. Companies in industries where they've been applying AI to their core business for several years, think finance, insurance, healthcare, where, understanding trends and looking for patterns is kind of in their DNA. A lot of them have taken this early stage approach of, well, I'm going to build out a data lake. I'm going to pump the data from all of my various monitoring IT operations tools into that data lake. And I'm going to go throw some math at it and try to mine it and understand. And I think that while that was a natural evolution for those companies, I think they're starting to realize just throwing math at a data lake is insufficient. And so they look out at the market and say, well, is there a company that's, already applying and sort of looking at that data in intelligent ways? And, for the most part, those applications are fairly early or just kind of nascent in their application. It's, can I do some rudimentary pattern matching, do some deduplication or time-based correlation to reduce the noise? And while that's helpful, it's not necessarily value added from my perspective, in that you're not really looking at it with the context required to make sense and make meaningful outcomes or meaningful recommendations. So I think 2020, we're going to see more meaningful applications of mathematical approaches to the massive amount of data that's out there. I think there's going to be a need for better data in, because as you know, garbage in is garbage out, no matter how good the algorithm is. So better data and applied intelligence is something that I like to kind of spin. I'd rather run my infrastructure with applied intelligence than artificial intelligence. So I think the ability to bring context to it and know, should I be using statistical regression analysis, or should I be using Monte Carlo simulation to understand or solve this particular problem? So to my mind, we're early in the application of AI capabilities to the big data analytics associated with IT operations, but I do think there's a lot of promise there. It's just continuing to mature the approach and know what math to apply in what situation, given kind of experience with running IT operations and knowing these set of symptoms typically are indicative of this root cause, and this is the outcome that we're looking for.
And another buzzword I keep hearing about at the moment is AIOps. So for anyone listening that could be a business leader or outside of the tech industry, can you explain exactly what AIOps is and also why it's so important?
Well, I think so AIOps, it's been defined at least 3 different ways so far by firms like Gartner, but generally speaking, originally it was algorithmic intelligence for IT operations. Now it's artificial intelligent operations. It's a little bit of what I was just talking about in terms of applying the right math to a given set of data to solve a specific problem. I think the reason it's so important, particularly today, when you look at just how massive or diverse a company's IT infrastructure is, it's simply reached a scale and a rate of change that's beyond a human's ability to react effectively and efficiently to maintain and guarantee its performance and availability, which is fundamental to how everyone does business or even interacts socially or on a daily basis. So AIOps, the promise is take those things that are known about how to run effective IT operations and apply machine learning and artificial intelligence to understand things like what is normal, to be able to filter all of the noise and allow sort of mundane or routine tasks or tasks that can be predicted or forecasted, allow the machine to handle those so that the humans involved can get to the higher order business of figuring out strategy and understanding where workloads should be placed and what should live in cloud versus on-prem. And if it's on-prem, how do I build the right on-prem infrastructure to support not only where my business is today, but where it's going. So, in the same way that, big data analytics applied to things like supply chain management, I don't need to figure out where to ship a given set of inventory based on a spreadsheet. I can let, understanding supply and demand at an advanced level dictate, how I manage my supply chain. Think of the same thing applied to IT infrastructure capacity. If I can understand, behavior and patterns and the way my applications are leveraging the infrastructure, I can put the right capacity in the right place to anticipate those needs. And I can do it much faster and with a lot more precision. But again, I think it's early in its emergence. I think there's some varied levels of maturity in the technologies, and to my mind, really the experience to make sure those analytics are well informed and solving for the right outcomes is going to be the difference maker in 2020.
Fantastic. And back to Virtana for a moment, because your solutions provide application workload visibility to more than 500 customers, I believe, including global 2,000 enterprise companies, cloud service providers, and federal agencies. And the list goes on and on. But are there any use cases that you can offer today that will help people listening visualize how Virtana empowers companies to maximize their performance, availability, and utilization of their production IT infrastructure from the data center to the cloud? Because I think it's a journey that a lot of people are going to be wanting to take.
Yeah, I can certainly do that. Well, I mean, visualizing on a podcast will be an interesting challenge, but I'll give it a try. So I look at, if you look at that journey, and I think all customers are on that journey, and I think some rushed in to cloud with the promise of getting out of the data center business. I think cooler heads have prevailed, and people are now understanding there are, applications or workloads or use cases that are very cloud friendly. With its geolocality, or they need elasticity that can only be achieved in a cloud-based infrastructure. So I think we're starting to see that cloud smart approach. Virtana, we have technology that can monitor your on-prem data center, understand your workloads and exactly how they behave in a traditional private cloud infrastructure. We have technologies to understand, what application workloads can be migrated, what needs to be migrated together, what cloud provider can deliver the best performance to cost ratio for you. And then we have technology that can monitor your cloud native environment, make sure that you're right sized, that you're managing things like reservations appropriately to the workload changes. And so, I think that visibility and that kind of purposefulness is going to be paramount going forward. When I think about a particular use case, and this is a more advanced use case, but you kind of asked me of that 500 plus customers, what's compelling from my perspective. I look at some of our more advanced users, and there's companies, particularly in the software as a service business, because that is cloud, but the infrastructure supporting software as a service looks pretty traditional if you peel back the layers. But they're driven to innovate. A new feature, a new capability in a SaaS platform is competitive advantage. It is the differentiator that drives market leadership. And I think those are the companies that are leveraging the visibility and knowledge, that sort of source of truth around application behavior and infrastructure requirements, that are kind of transforming IT from what has historically been a cost center to truly a source of competitive advantage for the company. I've got one customer that literally they're able to accelerate time to market for new feature function because they have a very strong and, dare I say, intimate relationship between the application development side of the house and the IT operations side of the house. I think it's, DevOps has been this buzzword, but this is what I consider to be true DevOps, and that the infrastructure guys can actually tell the application guys, hey, if you code this differently, it'll run faster on my infrastructure. Or the application guys can tell the infrastructure guys, hey, I need to be able to do this massive job. Here's what the requirement's going to be. Can you build me an infrastructure to support it? And that kind of goes back to what I was talking to you before about some of these container as a service initiatives. And I've had multiple customers ask me, how do I build an infrastructure that's going to be highly performant for the containerized application workloads of the future? Those are conversations being had by thought leaders, by industry leaders. And I think those are some of the sort of relationships between application workload and infrastructure services that are kind of where Virtana's sweet spot is. It's how we visualize and give those two groups a common view, a common vocabulary to optimize the interplay there. It's driving cycle time, it's reducing issues, it's driving operational efficiency. Those are the things that, at least for me, are compelling.
I think it also feels like the modern IT environment and the very nature of IT operations must begin to start shifting to a more automated approach. So I've got to ask, I mean, are there any pitfalls to avoid or any advice that you would offer to business leaders, fellow CTOs or IT directors listening out there?
Absolutely. So the promise of automation and automation driven by AI, right, which is, I think, the ultimate goal of AIOps is to automate those tasks that can be automated. The risk there is, are you automating yourself into a disaster? So the way I like to look at it is automation with governance, right? So we can't lose sight of the fact that, this is a game between technology, people, and process. And you can't forget the people and process part of that. So automation as a technology is phenomenal, but unless you can bring the people and the process along and make sure that you're adhering to things like change management, you've got the right governance in place to say, you know what, if I want to automate this, let's take the output from the AI engine, let's validate it, 10 times. And once the 10th time is successful, now we'll automate it because we can trust it, right? Is this a normal IT operation? V-motioning a virtual machine between two ESX hosts, in which case, if I prove out that I've got the right data to V-motion it once and not 1,000 times, then let's go ahead and automate that. I mean, I can't tell you the number of customers that they have what we call V-motion sickness, right, which is contention-based moving of workloads, but based on a point in time. So you move it once, and then there's contention, and then you move it again, and you move it again, and you move it again. That's not helpful automation. That's automation that causes thrashing in the infrastructure. So I think intelligent automation and automation with governance would be the two things I'd recommend. I'm cautiously optimistic about this technology as well, but because we do live in the most mission critical environments across those customers, healthcare, electronic patient records, things like finance and trading, these are things that you need to be cautious and you need to make sure that any decision that you're automating is one that either the infrastructure has the resiliency to support or the outcome is going to be one that's expected.
Like, it's so true what you say to how we need to be cautious. And I think there's so much information out there and a lot of excitement and a lot of buzz that I think there's a certain amount of disinformation as well. So I've got to ask, as someone that's working in the heart of this space, what are the biggest misconceptions or myths around technologies like AI and machine learning that you could possibly finally lay to rest today?
Well, I don't know. I think that the sort of the discussion or the vocabulary around AI is still formative in terms of how it's applied to operations and the various approaches. I said it earlier. I think just throwing math at a data lake without understanding what the inputs are they related to each other, and what's the output or the outcome that you're driving to, I think can be risky. So I think you need to look below the covers of I say I've got AI, so uncover that. What are you using? Are you using heuristics? Are you using statistical regression analysis? Are you using simulation theory to test hypotheses? These are some of the sort of peel back the onion kind of questions that I would ask anyone who comes in and says, I've got an AI platform for your IT operations. I also think that reactive AI versus proactive or predictive AI is something that's still formative and transformative. There's some great technologies out there that can analyze the things that have already happened and tell you why they happened. But fundamentally, you're already in a forensics situation there. So you've had an accident and you're looking back at the scene of the crime. I think really understanding what are the solutions that can look at those things and predict or forecast what's going to happen before it happens, so that you can avoid those issues. It's great to be able to find root cause quickly once an issue does occur, but I'd prefer to avoid the issue altogether. So I think as we look at 2020 and again, the year of clarity or precision and visibility, I think that those are some of the things that are going to unfold. Is it's not just throwing math at bad data. It's not looking at what happened to understand why it happened. It's starting to understand based on known context, how do I look at what was happening, what is happening, and forecast what will happen so that I can truly get out in front of the issues or the situation and manage the environment proactively.
Fantastic. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure to get you back on the podcast today. But before I do let you go, obviously we're not going to leave it another 3 years, but could you remind the listeners of where they can find you online and contact a member of your team if they are left with any questions after our catch-up conversation today?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So on the new URL, the new website is virtana.com, virtana.com. And one of the things that we introduced, Neil, it's very new since we talked last, we do have the ability to download and try the virtual wisdom solution or the cloud wisdom solution right from the website. So I would encourage anyone who's interested in understanding what we do, how it might apply to their environment. If you've got a private cloud environment that you're looking to understand, visit virtana.com, download Virtual Wisdom Trial. If you're looking at monitoring a cloud-native infrastructure and want a SaaS-based solution, download Cloud Wisdom and give it a try. Both are, in my opinion, obviously, industry-leading solutions. But that download will initiate a conversation with one of our technical resources so that we make sure you can download it, get it installed, and start to sort of take a test drive. And I think that's the best way. You asked me earlier to visualize the experience. Well, that would be the best way to do it. Just, experience it for yourself.
Fantastic. And I'll add a link to that on the blog post that will accompany this podcast episode, which will be available on my website, techblogwriter.co.uk/Virtana. So much has changed since we last spoke, and just hearing about this comprehensive hybrid IT infrastructure, monitoring and real-time AI-powered analytics, it's just so exciting. So it's been an absolute pleasure to get you back on today and catch up what you've been up to. But more than anything, just thank you for taking the time to come and speak with me. So thanks again, John.
No, Neil, always my pleasure. I enjoy our conversations always, and look forward to seeing the blog out there, and look forward to talking. Let's not let it go 3 years. Maybe in a year, we'll the pace of change is accelerating. I think in the next year, we'll do what we've done in the last 3. So we should plan to catch up again.
Wow. Isn't it funny how much can change in a short space of time? As I sit here in my podcasting chair, it feels like very little has changed in my world. But since that first chat over 3 years ago, I left my day job in IT behind to become a tech columnist and podcaster, and then rebranded this podcast from Tech Blog Writer to Tech Talks Daily to fit this new daily format that we have. And now have guests booked in till, I think, mid-January, which is just insane. And also, in that time, Virtual Instruments has become Virtana, the leader in hybrid infrastructure management for mission-critical workloads. And the company is providing comprehensive hybrid IT infrastructure monitoring and in real time, but with AI-powered analytics for the modern enterprise data center. So it's great to see how the company's solutions are giving those IT operations teams deep workload visibility and, of course, actionable insights into their end-to-end systems that support their critical mission applications. And as a former IT apps guy, that is definitely a good thing. But I'm curious, if you're a long-term listener to this show, how much has changed in your life during the last 3 years since you started listening to this podcast? So as always, keep those emails, questions, and anything that comes into your mind by emailing me to techblogwriter@outlook.com or tweet me at Neil C. Hughes. Before I go, I think I should point out to you, you need to thank your lucky stars that this is an audio-only podcast, as somehow I find myself settling into winter like Walter White in a snow-capped cabin in the woods because I've not had a shave in 4 days now. So I'm going to go and clean up my act and return tomorrow freshly shaven and ready to roll the podcasting dice once again. TMI? Yeah, I know that, but I like to be completely straight with you all. So a big thank you for listening, and until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.